Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you live to episode number 35 of the Primetime Rundown interview series powered by Streamyard right here on the Eastern Observer and the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. I'm Joey Jarzynka. We are blessed to have with us here this evening the voice of Madden 21 and the last four Madden NFL games, also has appeared on the NFL on Fox and also does the NFL NCAA and also college football NCAA on Westwood One, Brandon Gaudin. Brandon, how are you? And how are things during quarantine amidst a few of the videos that you've put out there? How are things otherwise?
Thanks for the kind introduction, Joey. Everything has been going well. It's been a strange thing since March to not have broadcasted any games. I have been doing the Madden recordings remotely from my home here in Atlanta, and I've lived in Atlanta since 2013. So it's just strange, though, because I don't have kids. I don't have a wife, so I live by myself. So it's been a lot of solo time. So you mentioned those quarantine videos. I had to find ways to occupy myself. I felt like a semi-retired person for 6 months. But now slowly here, we're getting football back on the radar. So life will hopefully return to some relative norm in the near future.
Yeah, it's really crazy to see how 6 months, or just we're coming up to 6 months, has come and gone, and not having any sports to call, and seeing, or just thinking that March 12th and March 11th are the day that us sports people and us human beings will never forget. It is the day that the sports world and really world stop turning. But let's get this started where. For those that are just joining us for the first time, this interview series powered by Streamyard tells us all about our guests and how they've gotten to where they are today. So, Brandon Gaudin, how have you gotten to where you are today? It all started where you were born in Evansville, Indiana. Give us a little bit of a start from there, and then we'll keep going.
Dad's from New York. My mom's from Indiana. They actually randomly met in New York, and my dad moved from Manhattan to Evansville, Indiana, sight unseen. And I can't imagine what he was thinking back in the early 70s when he did that. But anyway, they raised us in Evansville. It's right on the Kentucky border. It's, most people haven't heard of it, but it's a bigger town than you would think. It's a couple 100,000 people. But growing up there in the late 80s, early 90s, when you turned on the television, you didn't have all the games that you get today. So we would either get the Cubs on WGN, or you could watch the Braves back then on the Superstation, TBS. And I had an aunt and uncle who lived in Atlanta. And so I just started consuming those Braves games at probably an unhealthy rate for a 7-year-old kid in 1991. And we went down to the 1991 World Series, the Braves versus the Twins. And when I walked into Fulton County Stadium for Game 5 of the World Series as a 7-year-old, it was hook, line, and sinker. I knew that I loved the game of baseball. I knew that I loved sports. And through watching those games on TBS, I fell in love with the broadcasters. Harry Carey's son, Skip Carey, was the lead announcer. And that's really where I developed my love and my passion for sports broadcasting. So I stuck with it. I would play baseball games in my foyer as a kid growing up, and I would play as the Braves, and I would be the announcer. And when I got to high school, I started announcing games on a local radio station. And I just Joey, I just stuck with it. I knew that it's always what I wanted to do. So I went to Butler University in Indianapolis to study broadcasting, and got one job out of college, and it led to another. And then here we are at 35 years of age.
It's absolutely crazy to see not only how time flies, but also to read up, Brandon, on how you got your start. So speaking of Skip Carey, the late Braves radio play-by-play man, way back when we did while we were doing our prep work here, not only are you a big Atlanta Braves fan, but you also sent a letter to the aforementioned Skip Carey as well. And really, you wanted some advice, and really what a lot of people say to do today is to reach out to people and do not be shy. And in order to get far in this business, you have to reach out for advice. You have to get critiqued, whatever the case may be. And you started that off at a real early age.
Yeah, exactly right. And good job on your research. Skip Carey was really the first guy that I idolized in the business. And so I remember writing him a letter when I was probably 11 or 12 years old. And I'll always remember when he wrote back. and it came on Braves and TBS letterhead. And it was just like the best day of my life that Skip Carey had written me a letter. He hand wrote it and just gave some suggestions on how to study up on the game, how to, advice that we all get. Practice broadcasting back then into a tape recorder, go back and listen to yourself, find out what you like, what you don't like. And I did that. I mean, that's what I did every day. As I was alluding to, I would take a little balloon, I would put a piece of Scotch tape around it. That was my ball. And my bat was the inside of a paper towel roll, the cardboard piece. That was my bat and ball. And I would hit that balloon around and announce the games. And that's really where I developed the love for the craft. But yeah, that letter to Skip Carey was really the first time that I had that taste of, oh, wow, this is really cool. And that is something that you're alluding to, Joey, that I always encourage broadcasters to do and that I still do, is to reach out to others for critique and advice. And don't just reach out to them when you're looking for a job or when you need something that is very personal. Just it's good just to make the connection and genuinely look to get feedback. If you're only looking for help in your career and then to get you a job, to me, that's not the proper way to pursue. Pursue with just this honest, when you go into it, be honest about, hey, I'm just looking to get better. And if I get a job from it, great, but I'm really looking to get better. And that's always how I tried and continue to try to pursue networking as I send out my tapes.
Right. Yeah. Basically, the common denominator is do not look selfish to your superiors or to the people that have, or your elders that have been in the field much longer than you. Otherwise, they'll simply tell you to go take a hike. Really, really good advice there, Brandon. So from 2002 to 2006, you were a part of the then Horizon League's Butler Bulldogs. So now, obviously, you are. I'd like to say you're a part of the Big East family with me, as I'm a St. John's alum, but unfortunately, you were not a part of the Big East then. But regardless of what conference their athletic programs participated in or were a part of, you still made your name. You graduated with a communications degree emphasizing in broadcasting. You also majored in political science and minored in business. Brandon, that is, those are not only two very difficult majors, but you double majored in political science and communication and minored in business. Where was there any social life there? How difficult was that for you as a college student, all joking aside?
I found some overlap. There were classes within the communication school that counted towards the broadcasting, and there were also classes that counted towards political science. There were a couple of political science communication courses that counted double. So I cheated a little bit there, or I guess I beat the system a little bit there. Business, the minor for that, those classes stood on their own. But yeah, I did still find time at Butler, not only to be social. I had a great time at Butler, but also I wanted to get reps. And Butler at the time, their broadcasting school, it still is sort of up and coming, but it was really in its infancy, and Butler's only 4,000 students. So what I liked about going to Butler as opposed to a Syracuse or an Indiana, not that those are obviously great schools, they churn out great broadcasters, but I like the idea of the smaller class sizes and getting repetitions early. And so I was able to call games, do voiceovers for commercials as a freshman and sophomore, whereas at some of the other schools, I might have had to wait until my junior and senior year. And I also liked that Butler was, I was a big basketball fan being from Indiana. I liked that they had the basketball identity and that they were in a city in Indianapolis that is a good sports town. So for me, it was a great fit. And I was fortunate, as I know you know from your research, to go back there a handful of years after graduating to be the play-by-play voice of the basketball team, which was a real thrill.
Yeah, exactly. And to be able to do that and to be recognized by your alma mater is really big, especially, because Butler University is not a small college. It's, regardless of what, maybe the enrollment is only 4,000 or whatever, however many students there are. It's gotten on the map, and we'll get to those points in just a few moments. But while you were there, did you? And this is actually aside from the notes that I had sent you. Was there like a radio station or a television station, or you just took it on your own and said, "All right, I'm going to call these games, and if the athletic department allows me to be or to give me a credential, we'll do that"?
Interesting, because Butler used to have a radio and TV station, but I was there right at the time when things were switching to web streaming. So what Butler had done is their radio station was streamed over the internet, and some of their TV stuff was streamed over the internet. So when we would broadcast a football game, it was a TV production, but it was an internet stream, and the same for the radio. But look, for guys like you and I calling a game, the mechanics were all the same, right. And that's really all I cared about. So yeah, so we had two different vehicles, but it was all web streamed. But we could do some on a radio call, which I did some for women's basketball and baseball, or for football, it was more of a true TV call that was then web streamed with video online.
Yeah, really a lot of good reps that you were able to have. And again, as the schools that you had mentioned, Syracuse, Indiana, and also from the New York area too, for the Fordhams of the world, those schools you can't really count out. But again, you made a name for yourself at Butler University. So moving forward now, 2005, this is a big year for you. You entered a national contest called, quote, You Call the Action. And that was at the time spotlighted by Greg Gumbel, who currently works for CBS Sports. And you won this contest, and at the national championship game in 2005, you were interviewed at halftime. You were also named a top 10 male student, and you were also given the distinction of most outstanding communications student in his class. So with those two things, Brandon, not only how honored were you to get those distinctions, but also to even have Brandon Gaudin and things like this be in the same sentence?
It was a lot more than I ever expected, that's for sure. In particular, that broadcasting competition, because I remember watching the NCAA tournament that year, and CBS and Pontiac, they were running advertisements to promote that they were doing that competition. And naturally, when I saw it, and I think anybody like me at that stage that wanted to get into broadcasting, all you had to do was record yourself calling a 15 to 20 second clip and submit it online, and you were in the contest. So I thought, well, heck yeah, I'm going to do that. Why not? I'm sitting here as a junior at Butler. This is what I want to get into. So I remember very vividly from my room and my fraternity submitting the clip to the You Call the Action contest. And then CBS contacted me a couple weeks later in the middle of the NCAA tournament to tell me that I was a finalist in the top 10. And then they called me, lo and behold, to tell me that Greg Gumbel had selected my clip and that I was off to St. Louis to appear on CBS during the Final Four. So that was a big thing, obviously, for my career, because it just put a little feather in my cap. It gave me something on my resume. It was an instant talking point when I was looking for jobs as I got outside of Butler. And then cascading from that, like you mentioned, the couple of honors that Butler bestowed upon me of being a top 10 male student and the communications award that I received there. Again, you don't go to school thinking those are things that I'm going to accomplish. We all set goals for ourselves. We want to do our best, but I didn't have those things listed on a sheet that I had to accomplish them to be a success story. But certainly knowing the peers that I went to school with and knowing about the communication school like I do at Butler and did at the time, that was an extreme honor that I'm still very grateful to have received.
Yeah, absolutely. And a very humbling attitude that you have there, which, a lot of people say that they want to accomplish this, but they don't. And then they get down and out for the count. But for you, you went in there, head up high, shoulders up high, and you just did your job, and you got these awards. So really, really good stuff. Now we keep moving forward. Now, your first job right out of college, you went the minor league baseball route, which everyone says is the way to go. It also says, or the stereotype for us play-by-play broadcasters is that you got to move out of the big city and go to a very small one. Now, you went to the Orem Owls, rookie A ball for Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Now, when you went there, did you ever think to yourself, okay, was this the route that I wanted to go down? Or did you want to stay, or maybe, with the distinctions that you were given from Butler and also this big honor from CBS, that you'd be able to maybe bypass the small city route and the minor league baseball route and head to a big city right away?
Wanted to do play-by-play. I really didn't have much of an interest of trying to go to a smaller mid-sized market to do anchoring. That just wasn't really on my radar. So, and baseball was my first love. And as you were alluding to, a lot of people advise us as young announcers to go to the baseball winter meetings and maybe look into getting one of those play-by-play gigs. And that's exactly what I did. I went to the winter meetings. I met with a lot of teams, and the Orem Owls were one that offered me. And the thought of going to a part of the country that I'd never been before in the Intermountain West and traveling throughout what I had heard was just gorgeous city after gorgeous city, and calling baseball night in and night out. That ultimately was what I wanted to do. I knew that I at least wanted to try that, see what it felt like. And as I look back on that now at 35, when I was 22 then, those were truly, I'm not just saying this, those were truly some of the best months of my career. It doesn't matter at what level I'm calling games, because everybody was around my age. As I was saying, the trips we were going to Wyoming, through Utah, through Montana. I mean, everything was just a beautiful stop. The games were fun. The players were passionate about it, even those that had signed big contracts. So yes, it was a grind. It was 76 games in 80 days, but it was baseball. I mean, I wasn't digging ditches. And so it was a real thrill. Those were some of the best months I've ever had in my career.
Yeah. So being able to do that now, as we were just talking about just a couple of seconds ago, now off script here, would you say that would you give that advice to a young up and coming broadcaster and say, now, do you have to go to a smaller market, or would you say something else?
Things have changed a little bit in that I still do radio for Westwood One, as you mentioned, and I love it, but things have geared so much more towards television, and not only TV, but digital streaming. So where you're doing, as we were talking about earlier, Joey, you're doing a TV broadcast, but it's just webcasted. Things have gone that direction so much, and radio seems to have a smaller piece of the pie, that I would not discourage them going into the radio realm, because I still think it's a powerful tool and it's a great first platform to learn before transitioning over to television. I really believe that. But I would say, look and see what the other opportunities are. I wouldn't just tell them, go to the winter meetings or nothing if you want to do play-by-play, because there are more local, like here in Atlanta, for instance, I know there's several streaming platforms where they broadcast really good high school football games, and they're telecast on the web. And so that's a way to get TV experience right away. So I would tell people now to look in to see what small colleges or even really good high school corporations are broadcasting games like that on the internet, because that can also be a really good avenue that, again, just wasn't available to me back in 2006 like it is today in 2020.
Yeah. The world continues to change, and also the sports world continues to change. But really, the bottom line is the broadcasting world has changed, and we'll get to that in just a few moments about talking or about calling a game on a monitor, and how you obviously have the experience doing some Madden work. We'll get there in just a little bit. So in 2008. You took or just before that, actually, you took an on-air hiatus, and you put that minor in business to work, my friend. And you used your business degree and formed a little startup right here, or actually 40 miles west, in New York City, in Manhattan. So give us a little bit of background about why you decided to take a break from calling games and putting that business degree to work, or business minor, to work.
A couple of answers to that. Taking a step back to in between my junior and senior year of college, I interned at ESPN in New York City. At the time, Stephen A. Smith was starting a television show called Quite Frankly, which only lived about a year and a half. But he started that out of the Hotel Penn right across from Madison Square Garden, and I was an intern on that show. I helped book guests. So when I went back to college my senior year, I actually kept a relationship with that show and continued to book guests while I was finishing my senior year. So I kept that going. The show ended, but I maintained a relationship with the executive producer and one of the other producers on the show. I finished calling games for minor league baseball out in Utah. I'm a year out of college, and my father, who's doing okay, he's still with us today, but he had a health scare. He had a heart attack. They live down in the Fort Worth, Texas area. So I actually went to Texas during his recovery and kind of just helped everything get back on solid ground and took a step away from the microphone. And while I was down there, I got a call from one of the producers that I worked with at ESPN, and he informed me that he and this other guy were going to start a group called Media One Management. And essentially Media One Management is a talent placement agency. So if you've got a lawyer, you represent them, and then when Fox News or CNN or MSNBC needs an expert in the legal field, you pitch that client and they appear as a 5-minute guest going on to the national networks. And so we were essentially a placement agency that had a lot of different people in different areas of expertise that would get on national news and in national print. And I thought, look, when again am I going to get a chance to go to New York City and do a startup with two people that I had worked with at ESPN who were high up in the business? I said, I'm going to go and do this. And so that's why I took the hiatus, coupled with my father's health issue. It just seemed to be the right time. I was still young at 23 years of age. And so I spent the next 2 years in New York doing that. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about business. But you just, as you know, Joey, being from that area, there's nothing like New York City. I think that there's an education to New York City that goes far beyond whatever you could learn in a classroom or in a boardroom. It's just a different vibe, a different energy. And that's why they say that not everyone makes it there. If you can make it there, you make it anywhere, right? That's what Frank Sinatra said. And so I think I learned a lot about myself in my early 20s, just being up there in that environment and being in some of the meetings and on some of the calls that I was, that helped me not only realize that I did not want to do that I wanted to get back into broadcasting, but also just helped me mature as a person through my early 20s.
Yeah, and that's actually what not only the advice that I've been given, but also I've heard as watching certain seminars and whatnot, where if you get out of your comfort zone, and this would you consider that getting out of your comfort zone, because now you're going into a completely different realm of let's call it business, no pun intended.
Out of my comfort zone, because I really had been training to call games, and that's what I had done for the first season out of college. But I did have confidence in my ability to, even though it was not calling games, it was still in the media space. And I felt like with my political science background, I had a pretty good idea of how to pitch those guests on CNN and Fox News and MSNBC. And I knew the two gentlemen that I were going to be working with, and that they were top notch, and we just sort of had a belief in each other. So it was stepping out of my comfort zone, but it was one of the best decisions that I made. And I think without those 2 years off air, I don't know that I would have appreciated getting back on air as much as I did when I took the next job at the University of Evansville. That is pretty crazy.
Now, you left New York City. You left here in 2008. And you went back to Evansville, and you worked with the Evansville Purple Aces, and you were also an on-air talent freelancer for the local ABC affiliate. Excuse me. So just to put 2 and 2 together, see if I can add up to 4. With working with the local ABC affiliate, I'm assuming with some of the connections that you made here at ABC, I'm assuming you probably translated that over back home with getting an ABC gig.
Home, I knew a lot of people there. Evansville, I mentioned it's a couple 100,000 people, but just like anywhere, there are pockets of town that feel very small, and you know this person, and your parents knew this person, your brother went to school with this person. And so I knew a guy by the name of Lance Wilkerson, who was the sports reporter on the ABC affiliate, and he knew that I was back in town doing the games for play-by-play for the University of Evansville, and he just said, hey, would you want to come and help out at the station occasionally? And so I would do packages for them, reporting on football or basketball, and then I would come be a guest on their Friday night high school football show. And so it was good because it gave me a little more TV experience while I was broadcasting on the radio side for the University of Evansville. And what was great about both of those jobs, in particular the University of Evansville, is that those are games that I grew up going to. Purple Aces basketball games in my hometown. Like I mentioned that I was a big Braves baseball fan, but I loved going to those basketball games when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. And so to go back home and get the chance to be the voice of the Purple Aces was to me a really special honor, especially at the age of of 24 to get a gig like that, I was very excited just to be able to broadcast Division I basketball. Now, they didn't have football, but I did basketball, baseball, and soccer. And so it kind of kept me in multiple sports. And then the ABC opportunity sprinkled in a little television experience as well. So it felt like a good next step, and it turned out being so.
Yeah, I was going to say, because every single opportunity that you get taken, there is a reason for that. And a part of that, you then went back to your alma mater. You went back to Butler. And you were right around the time of the 2010-2011 season. That was the Brad Stevens, Gordon Hayward era. That was the national championship letdown against Duke. And then also the Final Four appearance in 2011. So by bringing up all of those, obviously some good and bad memories, on the way there, but unfortunately could not get the win in either one of those years. But to be able to do that, to be able to broadcast for your alma mater, we'll start off with that. What did that feel like to be brought back and to be wanted to come back from your alma mater?
Realize how rare it is to get a couple of jobs that have ties to your childhood, but I had the job at home in Evansville. I grew up going to those games, and then I got to transition to my alma mater. And what I had really grown in identity with in Butler basketball during my time at school there. And so I just felt extremely fortunate that those were back-to-back jobs that I had the opportunity to have. And I did get the job right after that first Final Four run. So when they lost to Duke on the Gordon Hayward half-court heave, I found out a couple weeks after that game that Butler was going to be looking for a new play-by-play announcer. So I jumped all over it. They had contacted me. They knew I was at the University of Evansville. They were aware of my work. And a short time after that, they called and offered the position. And so I just made a short drive up from my hometown of Evansville, 3 hours up the road to Indianapolis. And yeah, the joke when I got the job was, oh man, congratulations, but you just missed it. You missed the run to the Final Four. And then as you alluded to, Joey, lo and behold, Butler, of course, would go and do that again in 2011. Although that game in the national title against UConn was much uglier, probably the nastiest national championship game shooting performance by any duo ever in the history of the game, and Butler lost 53-41. But it was a thrill to be along for that ride with your alma mater, alongside some friends that I had gained along the way. And then, just selfishly to be there for 3 years with Brad Stevens and to be able to develop friendship with him. And I would go to a lot of the practices early in the morning, and I love the X's and O's of basketball. So just to watch a technician like Brad, how he runs a practice, how he runs a program, I learned a lot from that. I mean, I learned a lot just how to be a leader and how to treat people, because he always did things the right way. So he had a very big impression on me, and still does to this day.
Yeah, it's really amazing, again, how it all comes back. Basically, for you, it all came full circle and eventually came back. Now, just a couple of years later, 2013, you were, or just actually before that, rather, you were hired by Turner. And you then got the gig to work while at Butler, a couple of other collegiate events for Turner. So for those that do not know, TNT, TBS, CNN, etc., all are under the Turner window or umbrella. Excuse me. So talk about that, Brandon, being hired by a major network.
Comes to a connection that I had at Butler, because what Turner does, obviously they have all of those NCAA championships fall under their umbrella, but their focus is the men's Final Four, and that's where they get a large chunk of their revenue. A lot of those events they oversee in Atlanta, but they outsource to production companies strategically throughout the country. One of those companies, Webstream Productions, is located in Indianapolis and was executively produced by a good guy that I know named John Cervisi. So John, when he got the torch passed to him from Turner to run some of these NCAA events, he contacted me. Turner approves the hire, and then I would go and do Division II baseball championship, Division III baseball championship, D2 golf. So all of these the things that would be seen as non-revenue to Turner and the NCAA. But for people like me, you're in your mid-20s and you're looking for more TV experience, that was a home run. And so to be able to couple that with the stuff at Butler, I really felt was a really good fit as I continued to try to climb up the ladder. And I'm still really thankful for that relationship with John Cervisi and the work that I was able to get back then, because it was, again, it was really the first time that I dipped my toe in the TV waters. But it was at a level where you could sort of make mistakes and you could learn and you could grow and go back and watch yourself. And I think it was just an invaluable experience for me.
Yeah, and to be able to have, again, Turner on your resume is nothing that should be, something that we should not be turning our heads from. 2013, you were hired as this was your real big break. Even though obviously Turner is big stuff, but here, Brandon, 2013, you were not only featured on numerous platforms or newspapers. There's a big New York Times article about you when you were at Georgia Tech. You were hired as the play-by-play voice for football and basketball. Were there any other sports that I'm missing there from Georgia Tech?
Well, but football and men's basketball were the two big properties that you would also have a coach's TV and radio show for as well. And yeah, I was. That was a gig. It was hard to leave Butler just because of my ties. So I didn't want to leave Butler just for any job. I knew that I wanted to go to a big city. I did not want to, no disrespect, I know these are great jobs, but me personally, I didn't want to go to like an Ole Miss or a job that was in the middle of nowhere. So when Georgia Tech opened, I said, that's one of probably about 8 or 10 jobs that are in a city that offer Power 5 football and Power 5 basketball. And I knew I loved Atlanta. I grew up loving the Braves. So that really was a great marriage for me. When I saw that job open, I immediately contacted the play-by-play voice at the time, Wes Durham, and he was kind enough to set up a meeting with me when I came down for the interview. He helped facilitate some good conversations within the athletic department. And then I would later get that job. And it was a special 3 years. And I grew to like Atlanta so much that even when I left Georgia Tech, as I told you at the top of the interview, I'm still in Atlanta. That's where I am right now. So and it's a great, Hartsfield airport here is a great airport to travel in and out of. So yeah, Atlanta is still home. And those 3 years with the Yellow Jackets were extremely special.
Yeah, you bring up the airport down there. That airport is a legit maze whenever I've gone down there before, and I have cousins that live up in Alpharetta, so it's I've gone down there a few times, and you can get lost down there and by accidentally make yourself go to Australia by mistake. It's really I've had problems getting to where I gotta go, but yeah, it's definitely a great place as well. So while, as you said, you now live down there, which is fantastic, and that's really cool because again, you explore a new city, it all comes full circle because you have always been an Atlanta Braves fan. So now you're living in the city where your favorite baseball team plays. Now, while at Georgia Tech and with the Yellow Jackets, you were hired by Westwood One. Now, this is big stuff. Now we're getting even higher on the totem pole here, Brandon. Now you're doing men's basketball, men's college basketball, NCAA, and also college football. Now, once you got this phone call, tell me things aren't starting to rumble in your stomach here.
And it's headed up by a guy, Howard Dinneroff, who I started to know back when I was 23 years of age. And I sent him my work, a game from the University of Evansville. And I really wasn't looking for a job. I just had heard of him, and I had heard that he was good at listening to tapes and getting back to people. And he replied right away to my email. He listened to my tape. He called me and talked to me about my tape. And so he and I developed this relationship of I would occasionally send him my work. He would let me know his thoughts. And then when I got to Georgia Tech, he called me and he said, "You're ready to do a game for us on the network level." And the first game that he gave me was a women's Elite Eight game. It was North Carolina and Stanford out in Palo Alto. And that was I was 29, maybe 30 at the time, 29, I think. But that was the first time that I did a game for Westwood One. And from there, the relationship just blossomed. That first game went extremely well. And then he moved me over to the men's NCAA tournament, and then that would eventually roll into a college and NFL football package. So things with Westwood One blossomed from there, and I'm very thankful because they still maintain with me a relationship. In fact, I'm going to be doing, without the Big Ten Conference playing this fall, I'm going to be doing quite a few games for Westwood One starting next weekend.
Oh, that's pretty good. So I'm really glad that we were able to have you on just before your work began to ramp up a bit. You know, obviously with a few of the videos that you had made during quarantine, we don't have any more time for that. So now we're getting back to working. And just before that, we get to interview you. So again, really thankful for that. So now, you know, Westwood One, and as you mentioned with Howard as well, I actually met him at the Big East Media Day a few years ago. Really, really nice guy. So definitely a good connection to have. And for those that are listening out there, definitely is a very, very good man and does respond to your emails rather quickly as well. So now we bring up Madden 21. Now, the reason why we bring this up is because, well, let's just say the man that we're talking to right now is the play-by-play voice for Madden 21. For those that cannot see, I have it on Xbox One, but you get it on whatever platform you guys want to. I know everyone wants PS4, but whatever it is. So, June 2016, Brandon, you replace the legendary Jim Nantz. That is humongous. Now, again, just to be able to say Brandon Gaudin is going to replace Jim Nantz, period. Obviously, there's more to it, but those words, that sentence, what goes through your mind when you hear that?
Kind of one of those things where you have to pinch yourself and remind yourself that it's real. And when I received the email from EA Sports while I was working at Georgia Tech, it actually came via LinkedIn. The director of talent at EA Sports sent me a note and said, "Hey, we've identified you as somebody that we want to talk to about an opportunity." Now, obviously, I knew what EA Sports was, but I had no idea why they would want to talk to me. I was in my second year at Georgia Tech. Well, come to find out, I got on the phone with them. I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and then they informed me that they were going to be moving on from Jim Nantz and Phil Simms as their announcers, and they had identified me as sort of a dark horse candidate. They had heard my work, and they wanted me to come down to Orlando, where their studio is, to audition to be the next play-by-play voice of the Madden video game. And so, obviously, I was excited. But I realized that the guys that had been on there before me, and Al Michaels and Gus Johnson and Jim Nantz. So I knew that it was probably going to be a pretty thick field and a lot of tough candidates to get past. But I went down to Orlando. I auditioned. I thought the audition went well. It felt good. I felt like their reaction to it was very positive. And then a couple of months after that, sure enough, I got the call. And that's one of those calls that you just never forget where you were. You know, I remember I was holding my gym shoes here in Atlanta, getting ready to walk in to play pickup basketball with some friends. It was 5 p.m. It was a beautiful sunny day, and the phone rang, and I saw it was a 407 area code, which is Orlando, and I figured that had to be the call, and sure enough, it was when they offered me to replace Jim Nantz, and that's one of those times where you can't say yes fast enough. So I was extremely, extremely honored to be able to say yes at the time, and the fondness for that role in that game has only grown since then. Getting to work with those individuals over the last 5 years has been extremely gratifying. And I tweeted this out the other day, and I really mean it. I've grown even more appreciative of things like that in the year 2020, where so many have lost jobs, so many have opportunities just ripped away from them. But a gig like that with Madden, I realize does not come along very often, and I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, exactly. And also the sports producer, Christian McLeod, he said this, quote, "What really attracted us to Brandon was he just sounds like sports." And you know what? I can attest to that, Brandon. You really do. Just to, it's again, to have your producer say something like that you sound like sports. Did you really ever think that there was a voice that just sounds like sports and that Brandon Gaudin can be along that line?
So good, because everything is so subjective in our business. Some people like certain voices and other voices don't resonate. But I do remember Christian McLeod, who's a great friend and just an awesome dude, saying that, and he still oversees our recording session. So when he said that, and after I had signed the papers to become the voice of Madden along with Charles Davis, it just kind of gives you that little bit of confidence of, okay, you know, I'm ready for this. I knew that they fully believed in me, that they fully believed in my audition, and they have been huge supporters, leading the way, Christian McLeod and our a couple of others there along the way, just fully behind me. And so it's made it really neat. And maybe the neatest thing of all is the relationship I've been able to form with Charles Davis, the analyst on the game, who used to be with Fox. Now he's going to do the number 2 game this year at CBS with Ian Eagle. And Charles's talent speaks for itself. You don't become a number 2 announcer at CBS and Fox without knowing what you're doing. But he's an even better person. And being able to, he lives in Orlando, being able to spend so much time with he and his wife and their family over the last 5 years on my trips down there to Orlando. I'm as close to Charles as I am with anybody in my life, and the relationship I've been able to develop with him is just the cherry on top to all of this.
It's really, really amazing to be able to make those connections in the field that you would once dream about as a child. And, you know, and it all comes back to, again, as an 11-year-old, writing a letter to the late play-by-play announcer for the Braves, Skip Carey. And then, you just look up and you almost say thank you. It's, it all started there for you. And it's really, and again, we're still not done here yet, because there's still a couple more things that you've been doing. Now the television side comes into play here, and you were hired by the Big Ten Network. Oh, right. And this is the real cherry on the cake. You were able, Brandon, to do some NFL on Fox games. That is probably, I would say to me, I don't know about you, but to me, that is probably the best thing that would happen to you. You're on television and you're on the network level now. Talk about that.
So everything rolled, to take a step back, everything rolled together at once. In my last year at Georgia Tech, I became aware of the EA Sports opportunity and auditioned there. Westwood One wanted me to do more games on both the college and NFL side. And at the time, Big Ten Network had become familiar with my work, and they were going to offer me to do some games on television. So it became this great scenario where 3 new jobs rolled into one. And that's why I left Georgia Tech, because if it had just been Madden, I would have kept doing Madden and stayed at Georgia Tech. And that was the original intent. But then when Westwood One wanted to bump up the amount of games that I was doing, and Big Ten Network said, hey, we want to work you into our TV schedule, then I knew I couldn't stay at Georgia Tech. So I left to pursue these 3 new roles. Now, since starting with Big Ten Network back in, 2016, I believe, if not 17, then my presence with them just grew. I did a handful of football games and I think 20 basketball games the first year, and it grew and grew. Well, Big Ten Network is owned by Fox. So in the second year, Fox started to take me away for a couple of basketball games. And then last season is when they started to use me on some football. And for the first time, they used me for the NFL on Fox Sunday package. And I did 4 games for them last year, which, again, that's another one of those bucket list items that you just think, oh, man, if I could ever do games for the NFL on the television side for Fox, that would be the ultimate home run. So to be able to have that opportunity, and I'm thankful to get that opportunity again this year. I'm going to get a few games coming up in the middle of the season. It's great. It's something that I never put a tag by saying, oh, I have to do this by 35 or 40 or 45 or I'm a failure. I kind of just let go of that mentality and just said, do your thing. And if people like your work and you work hard, then they will call you up for opportunities. And so far with Fox, that's been the case. And I'm hoping to just keep that trajectory moving.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, at age 35, to be able to do that, there are some people that do not get onto the network level, not only ever, but maybe not even until they're 50 or 60. So, and even then, now with the industry continuing to change and slowly getting younger, it simply does not happen. But we'll get to those conversational points or tips in just a few moments. Now, let's talk about the inevitable conversation, which always comes up, but it's COVID. And because we are stuck inside, at one point we were told to either here in New York pause or shelter in place, wherever it was, or simply just stay inside. Do your exercise and then come back in because it's not safe to be out there. So March 11th, March 12th, Brandon, I know where I was. Where were you when you heard that not only the world would stop turning, but also our world in this industry would be put on pause indefinitely?
That's in the Big Ten tournament. I had the first two games of the Big Ten tournament, and in the course of broadcasting then started to hear rumors from Big Ten personnel that they were thinking of making the rest of the tournament so that it was without fans. And I remember thinking, are you kidding me? They're going to take away fans. They're just going to play this tournament in front of nobody. And it wasn't me questioning their decision. I just couldn't believe that that was actually happening, that there was this virus that we had no control over that was going to, and then they said, well, maybe they're going to play the NCAA tournament without fans. And I thought that was crazy. Could never have imagined that just 24 hours later, not only would there be no fans, but everything was just going to be canceled. So I will always remember where I was because we, Stephen Bardo and myself and Mike Hall, we kind of broadcasted the last couple of college basketball games of the season. And then I was on a plane home the next day, and I was supposed to go down for Fox and do the next 5 weeks of the XFL season. And then with Brady Quinn Brady and I got the call the next day that the XFL was canceled. So you went from having all of these assignments, and I was getting ready to hit, no doubt, the busiest month of my year with Madden, with the NCAA tournament, with XFL. I was looking at my calendar, kind of shaking my head, thinking, how am I going to make all this work? And then it was all gone, poof, at the drop of a hat. And so for all of us, we're all going to have that story. It's kind of, not to make it even more morbid, but it's the only other thing in my life that I can think of that was like 9/11, to where you always will know where you were, what it was like, and then what happened after that. And that's how I view this pandemic, and haven't called any games since then. And other than just doing the Madden recordings until next Saturday, when I'll do Clemson Wake Forest for Westwood One. That'll be my first time. So I'm going to have to brush off the cobwebs a little bit and get ready to go here in 10 days.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild to think that, where it's been almost 6 months since we've done that. But also for you, Brandon, as you've said, that was, literally your March Madness, where you had all of that, all of those gigs to do, and then it all goes away. And it just shows that there are certain things that clearly we cannot take for granted, because just like that, in a drop of a hat, it can all go away. Now, the moment this happened, you're calling the game, and what was your initial thought? Even though, as you said, you thought about, obviously, you never forget where you were. But just the initial thought of when the Big Ten announced that the tournament was canceled, and then once, obviously, out here, the Big East tournament was then canceled, and then the NCAA tournament was canceled, and then the NBA season was suspended. Well, that was the night before, but then the NHL season was suspended, etc. What is your thought as a human being, not as a sports broadcaster?
How serious the virus was. I knew that if the top officials were saying that we needed to stop playing sports, that people couldn't gather in groups of more than 10, that there was a real issue here. And so that, I guess, as a human being, that's the first thing that came to my mind. And then the second is, obviously, this sucks. I love the NCAA tournament just like everybody else. March is one of the greatest months of the year for sports. And it was all gone. And then the Masters was going to be gone. And so just as someone who works in this profession, but not only that, is just simply someone who enjoys sports and competition, that was a real bummer, because you go into this state of isolation where you're not working, you're by yourself, obviously you're doing it for the betterment of everybody in the long run, but things got not very much fun very quickly. And so it was a strange time. And these last 6 months have really not even felt real, because I had been going at a pace where I think last year I was on 190 flights, and this year I was on pace to be on 200. And I was, I think, at 45 in March, and then boom, it's done. And I've been on 2 flights since, and those were just to go see family. So it's a complete change of course for me. And this fall is going to look much different without fans, even if some of these college stadiums might allow a small number of fans. But, I mean, heck, here in 5 minutes, I've got a seminar with Fox to go over how they're handling traveling in this new COVID era and what we need to do as announcers to take care of ourselves and what travel restrictions they're going to place on us. And understandably so, they're taking all the proper precautions, but never in my life did I think that I would be on a conference call to discuss COVID safety measures going into a football season.
It's beyond wild. And as we're just about to wrap up and in the final 2 minutes here, and one last question that I would have for you, Brandon, what would be, especially now during COVID, your advice to up-and-coming broadcasters who do not have access to calling a game or do not have access to the facilities to, let's say, call anything, to do anything? For those people that are really suffering mentally from this, what would be your advice to them and how to pick their heads back up?
Broadcasters, you can still broadcast. And, the first job that I got with the Orem Owls, I sent them a tape of me broadcasting a game that I was watching on television. With my first job in radio play-by-play on the basketball side with the Evansville Aces, I sent them a tape of me watching a game and calling it into a recorder. So you can still watch sports on TV. They're being played right now. And if you don't want to watch something, we have the ability to pull up old games on YouTube. And you can broadcast and go back to listen to yourself and see what you like and what you don't like and make notes about it and try to get better on it. That's always my advice to folks. Now, obviously, it's easier when you can broadcast a real game. I understand that. But sometimes, quote unquote, desperate times call for desperate measures. And if you really want to sharpen the tool that is your broadcasting voice and the platform, then you've got the ability to do that. As far as everybody else, look, I've said this before and I really mean it. I'm lucky. I get to broadcast sports for a living. And while I do travel a lot and the schedule can be crazy, it is still such a thrill. And I realize there are a lot of people that aren't as fortunate, that have to work jobs of manual labor or really intense jobs or jobs where they are just tough gigs day in and day out. And so I try not to take for granted the business that I get to work in. But for those that are struggling, for those that have lost work, whether in this industry or others, I know a lot of them. I know a lot of personal friends and family who have severely been impacted by this. There's not much else you can say other than to try to support them and to realize, as cliche as it is, that I fully believe with all this politics stuff going on in America that we are one people when it gets down to the end of things, and not only here but abroad. We are all in this game together, and so I think a little extra empathy and sympathy for those around you who are going through tougher times than you can go a long way through this pandemic.
Amen to that. Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Gaudin, really, really appreciate you coming on, and we're going to get you off right now so you can head on to a big boy call for Fox Sports. And again, folks, Madden 21 out in stores. Please order that on Amazon, go to Best Buy, wherever it is, and listen to Brandon. Do not mute him because that voice is great on a video game. Brandon, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, for one final time, Brandon Gaudin, I'm Joey Jarzynka, and for all of us at the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Group, we'll see you next time.